Chapter 11, The Competition. The annual Ashbourne gathering was entering its final days. Soon the carriages would depart. The guests would return to their cities. And Oakridge would become quiet once more. But before that happened, Theodore Ashbourne decided to create one final memory. The entire family gathered in the estate courtyard shortly after breakfast. Children stood in one group, adults in another. Everyone seemed curious. Even Ethan, the old patriarch, rose from his chair. Despite his age, his presence immediately commanded attention. Silence spread through the courtyard. Theodore smiled. When I was young. Several grandchildren groaned playfully. They had heard that sentence many times. The old man laughed. Listen first. The children immediately quieted down. Theodore pointed toward the large field behind the estate. I have prepared a competition. Excitement exploded. A competition? What kind? Is there a prize? Theodore nodded. Of course there's a prize. Now everyone was interested. Even the adults. The old patriarch continued. It won't be about intelligence. Several cousins looked disappointed. It won't be about family status. The adults nodded approvingly. It won't be about money. A few uncles laughed. Theodore's smile widened. It will be about determination. Ethan immediately felt suspicious. That sounded exactly like something the system would enjoy. As if on cue. A blue screen appeared. New optional task available. Ethan sighed. Of course. Participate. That was all. No explanation. No reward listed. Nothing. Typical. Theodore finally revealed the challenge. At the far end of the field stood a large wooden post. Nearly 2 kilometers away. The children stared. Then stared harder. One cousin raised a hand. Grandfather. Yes. That's very far. Theodore nodded. It is. The cousin looked horrified. The old patriarch chuckled. The challenge is simple. Reach the post. Touch it. Return. Silence. Several children looked as though their souls had left their bodies. Even Ethan blinked. That was a long distance for children. Especially younger ones. Lucas frowned. All the way there and back. Theodore nodded. Correct. One cousin immediately complained. That's impossible. Another nodded. Way too far. A third looked ready to surrender before starting. Theodore simply smiled. Then don't participate. The complaints immediately stopped. No child wanted to quit publicly. Especially in front of the entire family. Several adults laughed. Soon the competition began. The older children rushed forward first. Lucas among them. The younger children followed. Including Ethan. The moment he started running, the system appeared. Maintain pace. Helpful as always. Continue. Still annoying. Continue. Ethan rolled his eyes. Then kept running. The first few minutes were easy. Then came the difficult part. Fatigue. Children started slowing down. Complaints increased. Several cousins stopped entirely. One sat on the ground. Another demanded water. A third announced he was retiring from competitions forever. Ethan ignored them. Months of system training were finally paying off. His breathing remained steady. His legs remained stable. His pace remained consistent. Not fast. Not impressive. Just consistent. Eventually he reached the wooden post. Several older cousins had arrived before him. Including Lucas. The capital cousin looked surprised. Ethan. The younger boy touched the post. Then nodded. Hello. Lucas laughed. You're still going. Ethan blinked. Weren't we supposed to come back? The older boy stared. Then burst out laughing. For some reason. That answer made Ethan sound far more confident than he intended. Soon they began the return journey. That was when things became difficult. Very difficult. The excitement was gone. The finish line still felt distant. Every step seemed heavier than before. Several children stopped. Others slowed dramatically. Even Lucas looked exhausted. Ethan wasn't much better. His legs burned. His lungs hurt. His entire body wanted to quit. Then, Continue. The blue screen appeared. Ethan glared at it. I am tired. Continue. I know. Continue. You're impossible. Continue. For some reason. That made him laugh. Then he took another step. And another. And another. Slowly. Steadily. Relentlessly. Until the estate finally came into view. Cheers erupted. The adults stood waiting. The children crossing the finish line received applause. Lucas arrived first. The eldest uncle looked proud. Several cousins followed. Then Ethan crossed. Not first. Not last. Somewhere in the middle. Yet Theodore's eyes lingered on him. The old patriarch had noticed something. Unlike most children, Ethan had never stopped. Not once. He simply kept moving. Step after step. Exactly the way Theodore himself used to work. The competition ended shortly afterward. Everyone gathered once more. Theodore held a small wooden box. Inside rested a beautifully carved compass. A handcrafted item. Made years ago. The prize. The children immediately looked toward Lucas. After all, he had finished first. Naturally he should win. Right? Theodore smiled. Lucas finished first. The boy stood straighter. The old man nodded approvingly. Excellent effort. Then he looked elsewhere. Toward Ethan. The courtyard became quiet. Ethan? The young boy blinked. Yes, grandfather? Theodore handed him the box. Gasps spread instantly. Even Ethan looked shocked. Me? Theodore nodded. You? One cousin immediately protested. But Lucas won. The old patriarch smiled. Did he? Confused looks appeared everywhere. Theodore pointed toward the field. Lucas ran faster. The old man nodded respectfully. A worthy achievement. Then he looked toward Ethan. But Ethan never once looked toward the finish line. The courtyard became silent. He focused only on the next step. Theodore's voice remained calm. When he became tired, he continued. When he became uncomfortable, he continued. When others stopped, he continued. The old patriarch smiled. That is the habit I wish to reward. No one argued after that. Because everyone knew Theodore rarely made decisions lightly. That evening, Ethan sat alone beneath the giant oak tree. The wooden compass rested in his hands. For a long time, he simply stared at it. Then a blue screen appeared. Optional task completed. A pause. Then. Reward granted. Ethan waited. Nothing happened. Several seconds passed. That's it. A final message appeared. You noticed the lesson. Ethan frowned. What lesson? Silence. Then. Continue. The message vanished. Leaving Ethan alone beneath the evening sky. And for some reason, those single words stayed with him long after sunset. Because deep inside, he was beginning to understand something. Great achievements weren't built in a single day. They were built the same way long journeys were completed. One step. Then another. Then another. And somewhere in the darkness, the system remained silent. Watching. Waiting. Preparing Ethan for challenges he couldn't yet imagine. Chapter end. Chapter 12, The Departure. The Ashbourne estate felt different that morning. Quieter. Slower. Almost sad. The annual family gathering was ending. Carriages stood prepared outside. Servants loaded luggage. Children made final promises to stay in touch. Adults exchanged farewells. Soon everyone would return to their own lives. Ethan stood near the front gate. Watching. Listening. Thinking. For nearly 2 weeks, the estate had been full of people. Full of noise. Full of activity. Now it was all ending. His cousins gathered nearby. Some seemed happy to return home. Others looked disappointed. Especially the younger children. Lucas stood beside a carriage from the capital. A thick book rested under his arm as usual. When he noticed Ethan watching, he walked over. You'll miss us? Lucas asked. Ethan considered the question. Then nodded. A little. The older boy laughed. A little. I'll miss the quieter cousins. Lucas stared. Then burst out laughing. Fair enough. The two boys stood together for a moment. Then Lucas glanced toward the estate. You know. He hesitated. Your grandfather is impressive. Ethan nodded immediately. Everyone in Oakridge knew that. Lucas smiled. My father always talks about status. My teachers talk about achievements. My classmates talk about talent. He looked toward Theodore. But grandfather talks about character. Something thoughtful appeared in his eyes. I think that's why everyone respects him. Ethan silently agreed. Before he could answer, a loud voice interrupted. Lucas. The eldest uncle stood beside the carriage. It's time. The boy sighed. Coming. Then he looked at Ethan one last time. Next time we meet. Lucas grinned. I'll still be smarter. Ethan rolled his eyes. And I'll still be less annoying. For a moment, Lucas looked offended. Then both boys laughed. A few minutes later, the carriage departed. The first farewell. Many more followed. One uncle left. Then another. Then another. By afternoon, only Theodore, Darren, Ethan, and the rest of the household remained. The estate suddenly felt much larger. Much quieter. Much emptier. Ethan found himself standing alone in the courtyard. For the first time in days. There was nothing happening. No visitors. No cousins. No gatherings. Just silence. Then. New task assigned. Ethan groaned. Of course. The silence hadn't lasted long. Help repair eastern fence. The boy stared. What? The system remained silent. Ethan looked toward the eastern side of the estate. Sure enough. Workers were repairing damaged fencing. And Darren was already helping. The task wasn't difficult. Just unexpected. After a moment, Ethan walked over. His father looked surprised. Ethan, can I help? Darren blinked. Then smiled warmly. Of course. The next several hours passed slowly. Very slowly. The work wasn't exciting. There were no competitions. No rewards. No praise. Just effort. Wood. Nails. Rope. More wood. By midday, Ethan's arms hurt. By afternoon, he regretted every decision that had brought him here. The system offered no sympathy. Not even a little. Eventually Ethan dropped onto a nearby log. Exhausted. His father sat beside him. Neither spoke for a while. The wind rustled through the trees. Birds sang somewhere in the distance. The peaceful sounds of Oakridge. Finally Darren spoke. Thank you. Ethan looked up. For what? His father smiled. For helping. The answer surprised him. It seemed obvious. The system assigned the task. He completed it. Simple. Yet Darren looked genuinely grateful. As though Ethan had done something important. After a few moments, Darren spoke again. You know. His gaze remained fixed on the half-finished fence. When I was younger. Ethan listened. Few people talked about Darren's past. Especially Darren himself. I wanted to leave Oakridge. The boy blinked. You did. His father laughed softly. Of course. I was young. I had dreams. I wanted adventures. For a moment, sadness crossed his face. Then it disappeared. But life doesn't always follow plans. Silence followed. Ethan waited. Eventually he asked. Do you regret staying? The question escaped before he could stop it. For a brief moment, Darren looked surprised. Then thoughtful. A very long silence followed. Finally. No. The answer came without hesitation. I regret some things. His father smiled. Everyone does. But staying here. Darren looked toward the estate. Toward Theodore. Toward the home he had protected for years. Then toward Ethan. No. The smile on his face was small. But genuine. I got something better. Ethan didn't fully understand. But somehow. He thought his father wasn't talking about the estate. Or the village. Or even Theodore. He was talking about family. About the people he loved. That evening, after the repairs were complete, Theodore inspected the fence personally. The old patriarch walked its entire length. Examining every section. Everyone waited. Finally he nodded. Good work. Simple words. Nothing more. Yet Darren looked strangely pleased. As though those two words meant a great deal. Theodore noticed Ethan nearby. A faint smile appeared. You helped. Ethan nodded. The old man placed a hand on his shoulder. Good. Then he walked away. That was all. Yet Ethan somehow felt proud. Later that night, he lay in bed. The estate had returned to normal. The guests were gone. The noise was gone. The excitement was gone. Only Oakridge remained. Only home remained. Then a familiar blue screen appeared. Task complete. Ethan waited. Another message appeared. Observation recorded. He immediately frowned. What observation? Several seconds passed. Then, not all valuable work is celebrated. The message vanished. Ethan stared into the darkness. Thinking about his father. Thinking about the fence. Thinking about Theodore. And slowly, he began understanding something. Some people built reputations. Some people built wealth. Some people built influence. But others built the foundations that allowed everything else to stand. And those people were often forgotten. Yet without them, nothing would remain. Outside, the lights of the Ashbourne estate slowly faded. Tomorrow would be an ordinary day. Or at least, it should have been. Because before Sunrise arrived, a visitor would enter Oakridge. And that visitor would bring news capable of changing the future of the Ashbourne family. Chapter end. Chapter 13, The Messenger. The sun had not yet risen over Oakridge. Most of the village still slept. The roads were empty. The fields were quiet. Only a few farmers had begun their morning routines. It should have been an ordinary day. Instead, a lone carriage rolled toward the village. The vehicle was unlike anything normally seen in Oakridge. Its dark wooden exterior was polished to perfection. A silver crest decorated the door. 4 powerful horses pulled it forward at a steady pace. Even before it reached the village center, people began noticing it. Who's that? Visitors? At this hour, curious villagers peeked from windows. Others stepped outside. Within minutes, whispers spread through Oakridge. The carriage did not stop at the marketplace. It did not stop at the inn. It continued straight toward the hill overlooking the village. Toward the Ashbourne estate. Inside the estate, Ethan was already awake. Not because he wanted to be. Wake up. As usual. The boy rubbed his eyes. One day, he muttered, I'm going to sleep past Sunrise. No response appeared. The system clearly didn't find that amusing. After washing up, Ethan stepped outside. The cool morning air greeted him immediately. For a moment, everything seemed normal. Then he noticed movement near the front gate. Several servants were gathered there, talking quietly, pointing toward the road. Ethan frowned. Something was happening. Curiosity quickly defeated common sense. He moved closer. A moment later, the distant carriage appeared. The servants exchanged surprised looks. Capital crest. What is someone from the capital doing here? Theodore hasn't mentioned any visitors. Ethan immediately became interested. Visitors from the capital were rare. Very rare. Especially visitors important enough to travel in such a carriage. The vehicle eventually stopped before the estate gates. The driver climbed down. Then opened the carriage door. A middle-aged man stepped out. He wore a dark formal coat. His posture was straight. His expression serious. Most importantly, he carried an official leather case. The moment Theodore saw him, the old patriarch's smile vanished. Ethan noticed immediately. That alone was alarming. Because Theodore Ashbourne rarely looked surprised. Yet for a brief moment, he genuinely looked concerned. The visitor approached. Then bowed respectfully. Lord Theodore. The old man nodded. It's been many years, Alden. The visitor straightened. Indeed. His expression remained solemn. I wish this visit were under better circumstances. Silence followed. Theodore's eyes narrowed slightly. What happened? The visitor glanced toward the gathered servants. Toward Ethan. Toward the others watching nearby. Then he lowered his voice. I carry an official notice from the capital. The atmosphere immediately changed. Even Ethan felt it. Something was wrong. Very wrong. The visitor opened his leather case. Carefully withdrew a sealed document. Then handed it over. The silver seal glimmered beneath the morning sunlight. Theodore stared at it. For the first time in Ethan's life, his grandfather looked troubled. A long silence followed. Finally, Theodore broke the seal. His eyes moved across the contents. Slowly. Carefully. With every passing second. His expression grew heavier. The old man eventually lowered the letter. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The entire courtyard waited. Then Theodore looked toward the visitor. When was this issued? 3 days ago. The old patriarch closed his eyes. For several moments, he said nothing. Then he turned toward one of the servants. Send riders immediately. The servant straightened. Sir? Theodore's voice left no room for argument. Contact all 4 of my sons. The courtyard froze. Even Ethan stopped breathing. All 4 sons? The family reunion had ended only yesterday. Why would they be called back? What kind of news required that? Theodore's gaze remained fixed on the letter. Tell them this. The old man's voice was calm, but unusually serious. The entire family must return to Oakridge. A chill ran down Ethan's spine. Because he had never heard his grandfather speak like that before. Not once. The servant hurried away. The visitor remained silent. The villagers whispered nervously beyond the gates. And standing in the middle of it all, Ethan stared at the sealed document. For some reason, he felt as though something important had just begun. Something capable of changing the future of the Ashbourne family forever. Then, unexpectedly, a blue screen appeared before his eyes. Observation recorded. Ethan frowned. What observation? He whispered. The system remained silent. For the first time in years. It offered no answer. Only silence. And somehow, that silence felt more unsettling than any punishment. Chapter end. Close.